All right, guys. Well, welcome to the newest segment of the Shared Practices podcast. We are doing the pursuit of ownership. And if you're wondering who created that name, it's Richard. I don't think anybody was wondering. That is such a Richard name. It's like the pursuit of happiness, but the pursuit of ownership. So this is the newest segment of the Shared Practices podcast, and this is one that I'm really excited about because there are three other people with me here today that are going to really take this and run with it. And I think you guys are going to be super impressed with them. So for those of you guys who don't know, we have, I don't know if you want to call it an intern program. I think that'd be a little bit too,
That's a
make it
formal.
Yeah, so formal, So we have three interns at Shared Practices, and they're awesome. And so I thought that we would take a minute and kind of introduce each one of them one by one, and you guys can get to know them. They've been working, hand in hand with me probably the most for the past 2 years now. So, these are not people that I met last week. These are guys that I talk to on a daily basis for the last 2 years that I trust, empirically to lead this show to what it can and should be. And it's really a continuation of the pre-ownership segment of our show that was in the past, and we want to stay in the present. So I'll let you guys kind of take it away. We'll start with Tyler, and then we'll kind of work our way through Aaron and then Clay. Just kind of introduce yourselves and talk about I guess your experience as an intern at Shared Practices.
Yeah, thank you, George. So my name is Tyler Tolbert, as George likes to mispronounce chronically. Used to be a mistake, and now it's on purpose.
So 2 weeks from now, you're going to hear an episode. Tyler came to my office, and so I thought, I love getting timely episodes. We knew it wasn't going to be released for a while, so we record it, and at the very end, I say, "This isn't the last you hear of Tyler Tolbert." And then he goes, "It's Tolbert." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I've been working with you for 2 years. I still call you Tyler Tolbert."
It is what it is. That's just for the record. If I let it go there, that would change the pronunciation of my name.
Forever.
Like I had to put it on record right then and there. So yeah. But anyway, so I am a D3 at the Dental College of Georgia. So kind of making my way. I first reached out to George right there at the start of my D1 year. And kind of just got into podcasts while I was working in a dental lab. And I've been reading through a whole lot of threads on Dental Town, and I'd come across George's name a few times, and just kind of felt like, he was reaching out through the listserv, and so I responded to it, and surprisingly, he responded back. And so, that was the impetus for all this, and one thing led to another. And so I've just been kind of doing little odd jobs for him, and me and Aaron and Clay have all been working together for some time now, and I've really enjoyed it and learned a whole bunch of stuff. And I really feel that, probably a lot of listeners can identify with this, that Shared Practices has definitely, molded who I'm becoming as a dentist. Finding it so early, I feel very fortunate to have done so, because I think it's really kind of like guided me along and helped me in making the choices that I'm making now in school. And so it's really cool now to be able to kind of give back and be a part of that process for other people that are coming up. So I'm really excited to do so.
So for those of you guys, I like to give my side of each one of their stories. And I'm sitting there and I get this email from this D1 student at Georgia. And it says, "In this post on Dental Town, you mentioned these books, so I read them. And then, you mentioned reading this thread, so I did. And then you also mentioned this, so then I did that as well." And, there's there's a level of enthusiasm, like,
Wow.
what kind of D1 does that, And then, it was just, it reminded me so much of myself sending these crazy emails to people that I never thought would respond with all of this stuff. And, I hate to call it a crazy email, Tyler, but, at the end of the day, it was.
It felt crazy.
And
should have seen it before I edited it.
Oh, geez. So anyway, I reached out to Tyler, and, I saw something in him, and, I think you guys will see what I saw in him. And, he's super bright, and he has a great ability to really ask great questions and, kind of have a great train of thought in terms of challenging people's beliefs and whatnot. So he's led some of our group coaching program calls, and he's really shined. And so we're really excited for him to be on the segment, and, so really, really excited.
Thank you, Troy.
All right, Aaron.
And Tyler also uses the biggest words ever.
I'll try and refrain from doing that.
He's a wordsmith, yes.
They've made me self-conscious.
All right, so my name is Aaron Fritsch. I'm a DS4 at San Antonio. I also replied to that same email chain that Tyler replied to. I don't remember exactly what I said, but George reached out back to me, and I guess since that day, he's been bossing me around, telling me to do things ever since then. we've been down some wild goose chases, done some crazy things, and I'm excited to be a part of it. And I'm excited all the connections that I've met from George. And I'm excited to be on this podcast.
Aaron was the one that surprised me. I think Tyler I saw coming. Aaron Aaron was very skeptical of everything I ever said for the longest time. And just anything I say, well, George, how is that going to work? And but man, is he, Aaron's very technical and super like great with numbers. And I think, of all of us, he's probably the one that, like if we're looking at a practice eval and we're trying to figure out like where a certain expense went, where something is going on, and we need somebody to help us like decipher that minutia or that type of information, like that's Aaron, somebody who can understand things to that level of depth. And so, that's what I saw in him after working with him that really got me really excited. And so, at first I was like, this guy is, he's busting my chops. He's my most difficult dental student I'm interacting with right now, and then he was my biggest surprise, like Aaron turned out to be awesome. And he started out, I was like, man, this guy's really giving me a hard time. And, it was cool. So I definitely, Aaron's a great friend and they all are really, which is for me, the funnest part is the friendship. So I hope that comes through. And I think between the three of them, they're great friends. And so I think the chemistry on air as they kind of iron it out will be really fun to listen to. So we got Clay. Clay's our goofball. He's over here dancing. So
I try to keep it light.
All right, Clay. So tell us a little about yourself.
Sure. My name is Clay Schwinke. Schwinke, I always tell patients, Schwinke like Twinkie. I usually gets them to laugh. And people usually remember that too. But I am actually a practicing dentist. I graduated this year, 2019, from University of Missouri, Kansas City. And kind of all throughout dental school, I knew practice ownership was something that I wanted to do, always sought out more. I knew dental school wasn't going to give me kind of everything that I needed to kind of be ready to buy a practice. And so the podcast, Dental Town, and kind of both two people that were kind of always just at least a couple of steps ahead of me, definitely a year ahead in school, George, and just kind of watching him kind of go through everything and actually buying a practice right out of school. Now I don't own a practice, but kind of figuring out what I wanted in a practice to buy and try to go find that. I think learning from shared practices and resources like that in dental school really kind of helped make my journey. So I'm trying to remember when I reached out to, I think
so we were looking for more help.
That's right.
Yeah. Yep.
I wasn't on this initial crazy interview, crazy email, but they did ask for more help. And then I do remember, I think I sent a pretty crazy email too.
You offer 10 to 20 hours a week of your time, which pretty much sold it. Yeah.
I had to go big. I had to go big. I was bored.
Yeah. It sounds like it,
Yeah. So, and then, I try to, I think these guys do a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, and I try to contribute where I can and keep it light, like we mentioned in the beginning. Make sure everyone's having fun. But yeah.
So Clay, are you comfortable talking about your current situation? Or are you uncomfortable talking about your current situation?
Oh yeah, comfortable.
So, I think first, before we do that, I owe it to Clay to talk about the things that we saw in him. And, I think Tyler was the one that was really, kind of on the forefront of talking to Clay. But, just the enthusiasm, like just the enthusiasm and the willingness to jump in, all in, and such a big fan of the show, so, and the more we worked with Clay, the more he stood out as, just an exceptional person and student. And so we got him, he was a D3 at the time. Yeah. And, now he's a D5, so no longer in dental school. D5. And so, you graduate from the intern program.
Yeah.
When you graduate from dental school.
I'm in no man's land.
Yeah. So Clay is very much involved in our process, but, he's a practicing dentist and he's a little bit more busy. So he's in the process of, becoming a practice owner. And Clay, I'll let you talk about that to the level which you're comfortable.
Sure. And I don't know if we want to kind of talk about this more in the finding the practice, but what I think George had an episode about finding a practice, and basically what I did is I got a list of dentists from the State Dental Association. Basically chose where I wanted to live. I think that's kind of some dental students and maybe even some dentists have kind of a hard time figuring out what they initially want, where they want to live, all that kind of stuff. But I think that's the most important thing in the beginning to really kind of nail down. So I got the list, figured out where I wanted to live, and then kind of paired through those dentists by age. Didn't you do this, George?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So the Hariri method. Yeah. So, I mean, and what I saw was, okay, somebody's doing this. Why don't I try this? It seemed to work for him. So let me go ahead and try it. And, I sent letters out to dentists. Well, my list was like 500 dentists. And I was like, okay, this is kind of a lot. And I had a very specific area that I wanted to kind of live in. And so I went through individually all those dentists and pared it down to 150. And I sent letters to those. And I got about 15 responses. And actually, the very first office that responded is the office that I'm currently working in and then going to be eventually buying, hopefully.
So we won't talk too much about Clay's office because, it's in the middle of, I'll wait till he's comfortable and ready and whatnot. But I can tell you the very first time I felt FOMO was when I looked at Clay's office. Was like, dude, are you kidding me? I would like this exists. This type of opportunity exists. It's a huge group practice, and it's. I'm so jealous of the fact that he gets to buy it and I don't. So I've had that a few times now. Go ahead.
And honestly, I mean, none of it would have been. I wouldn't have found this office without shared practices and without the things that you guys are teaching, because it was just off market. The guy didn't know he wanted to sell until he saw my letter. It was kind of one of those things. So, I mean, I owe a lot to shared practices for the opportunities that I'm kind of going through. So.
Well, that makes me feel better that I don't have that practice. Thanks, Clay.
And you're getting nothing for it, George.
Yeah, I just did exactly what you did, and you could have had this. I don't know what you're doing.
No finder's fee, no nothing, just a thing.
Just the public. Thanks, public. Mike. Thank you. Yeah. Appreciate it. Totally worth it. Yeah. All right. So in this show, what we're really going to talk about, and I guess one of the things that we look back on, let's think about how long ago season 2 was. That was like, probably 2+ years ago that we finished up season 2. So a lot has happened at shared practices since then. We're going to forget that season 3 ever happened. It was startups. And, let's just erase it from the record. Just season 2 goes straight into season 4. And that's the way it goes. Okay. So, I think for us, we are just acquisition based. That's just our preferred method of getting into ownership. And there are certain very select few situations in which a startup might make sense. And, outside of that, we just tend to like the acquisition route. So, this pre-ownership segment is sure, there might be some startup stuff in there, but, for the most part, it's going to be acquisition based. And it's going to have, I guess our newer philosophies about ownership and our newer philosophies about practice acquisitions, I guess since season 2, what have we done, right? I bought a practice. Richard's bought 3 practices. We brought Matt, who bought a practice. We coach dentists. We have all this access to all these analytics with practice by numbers. We did a group coaching program where we helped, 16 dentists get into practice ownership. We've learned a lot. And, we have a renewed sense of understanding, and we have things to add that we didn't have before. And so an ongoing segment of our show that's dedicated to pre-ownership, run by these awesome people, allows us to really continue to share our knowledge in this space to the segment of our audience that isn't in ownership yet. And so that's really what the pursuit of ownership is all about. And so I thought we could kind of go around and just talk about, and this is an introduction episode, this is an intro episode, so you guys can get to know our hosts, Tyler, Clay, and Aaron. And so, Tyler, I'll start with you, but what kind of stuff in the time that you've been with shared practices for 2 years, like, have you really learned from, about, I guess, like, kind of what are some of your big takeaways, I guess?
Yeah, well, the first thing that I was kind of doing in my first function, with SP was actually sort of learning the art of evaluating practices, being able to screen them, um, you know, helping people, guiding them in their decision on, what to look for, how the numbers shake out, and just sort of how understanding how money moves in and out of the practice, and what factors there are to consider. So that's kind of what the springboard was for me initially, and kind of the avenue that I'm coming from. But certainly some things have changed. And it's funny hearing you sort of list all the things that have changed in the past couple of years and all the new things that we've learned. I think because we've been in the process of it all, it just sort of seems like we've been doing more or less the same thing. But we're not at all. We're a totally different operation than we were when I first came on, to which I take no credit for. I mean, you guys are just, always chugging along and, trying new things, and sometimes it's difficult to keep up, but I like to think that I've been able to absorb some things along the way, and being able to, kind of wind it back and bring forth all these new lessons that we've learned is a really interesting opportunity. And, I hope to, bring something new to the table. And I think that, I think one thing we can bring now is a more empirical sense. During season 2, a lot of stuff, I mean, neither you nor Richard actually owned a practice, and we didn't have Matt on, right? So it was more or less just, this was information that you guys had learned from, thought leaders in the industry, and people that were coming forward. And that was your information base. It was just listening really well and taking really good notes. And
So if you guys are wondering what we're chuckling about, I'm just gonna talk about it. So the practice underwater, you guys have probably heard me talking about original thought leaders for a while now, and Richard and I were not original thought leaders in season 2. We were taking things from thought leaders and sharing them on our show, and I think there are some areas, and I'm excited. Like, I genuinely feel like we are revolutionizing the way that practices are looked at. Pre-ownership, with some of the things that we're able to do now with our information and practice by numbers. So yeah, I mean, we are becoming, thought leaders in very small specific areas, but it's exciting. Nonetheless, being a thought leader is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what I was getting at. Now you guys actually do have some authority, and you can take your own experiences and your own data and put that forth and help people implement it. It's not just sort of, a blue sky type plan. So, being able to witness that and coming to a stage in my own career where I'm going to be trying to emulate that myself and learn from some of the mistakes that you guys made, is really exciting. And being able to kind of, talk people, an audience through that as I go through it, and, as Aaron goes through it, is a really, really cool opportunity.
And we really like the fact that Richard and I recorded the majority of our pre-ownership content as pre-owners. I think that just adds a level of authenticity to the content that we wouldn't have had otherwise. So like, you're kind of like joking around about like, now we have authority, but it's like, at the same time, like before, we had done a lot of evals, we knew stuff, but we didn't know everything.
Exactly.
I think we were open and we acknowledged that, and like on the surface, somebody's like, what are you doing as a 4th year dental student teaching people about practice acquisitions? And it's like, well, you do your best. But at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, we know a lot more now.
Yeah.
And you guys have learned a lot more with us, and that's the really cool thing.
Yeah, and I mean, there's definitely proof of concept, and I think that, because we're still, we're in that budding stage. I'm a D3, Aaron's a D4, and Clay is going to be wading himself into practice ownership on on his own time. We're able to sort of recapitulate all that with the new things that you guys have learned, and so it's just going to be proving the things that we've learned since then can also be just as beneficial and work out for you. So,
Aaron.
So my big takeaway with our time here is that my initial idea of what dentistry could be was so much smaller. And what should I've done to really open my eyes about the types of opportunity that actually is out there in dentistry, and the different avenues that you can actually do that. I would have never, I still don't really like the group practice idea that much, but I see a lot more of the benefits of it coming from you now, but it's opened my eyes to that maybe that could be a possibility down the road. And how y'all just continually, don't know, you don't want to just stay in this one single place. You guys are always pushing for this next thing and always trying to learn and keep ideas open. You don't ever like just shy away ideas like, no, that's not going to work. It's not a good idea. You sit down, think about it, and give it an honest effort if it's a good idea or not. And that's one of the big takeaways that I would take from it.
Aaron, do you mind if we share that conversation that me and you had at my house?
We can. Go for it.
So,
you share your thoughts on that, George.
So my favorite part about our interns is that like they've learned a lot from us, and then they get to go through the experience of trying to pursue ownership. I get to kind of help them out along the way because they're some of my best friends. Aaron, he was at my house and he was sort of talking about, he was looking at the situation in Texas where he lives and where he wants to be. Very, very little delegatable clinical duties, but that's okay. Texas is that we'll go to Texas.
It's awesome.
Sure. And and so then he was telling me about the situation that seemed very straightforward. It's almost like the type of practice that's very turnkey, built for the type of dentist who, is very clinically oriented. They just want to walk into something that has very little to do, and it's kind of just there ready for them, like very much of a refined practice that, might be at a premium, but cash flows enough to justify the cost. Like that's what we teach people to buy. And so Aaron found it. And he was looking at it. But at the end of the day, I think for me, looking at Aaron, I'm like, look, you've been working with me since a second-year dental student. Like walking into a practice with little to no growth opportunity might not be what's best for you as an individual and as a happy dentist. The challenge of growing a practice is so enjoyable that, I would hate for you to lose out on that experience walking into something a little bit too ready for what your skill set might require. I think what I recognized in him was, his strength is, the business side of things. Just through everything that he's done, with or without me, that would have been a strength. And I kind of stopped him and I said, look, you're walking into something that, sure, it's fine, you'll make money, but like, will it challenge you enough so that you can be happy in your career? And that was the really cool conversation that we got to have. And so it's those types of conversations that for me are really enjoyable. And so that was, Aaron's situation.
Yeah, and to expand on that conversation, the big thing that I run into between that situation and other situations is clinical wise, I think I've learned a whole bunch. And I think this is something that other people will also go through. So I can go into one practice where I will learn from a clinical mentor who is very savvy on the clinical side of things, who will be able to teach me productive procedures and heavy prosthodontics and things like that, which I do have a favor for. But it, like George says, it won't necessarily push me to grow a business because it already is a mature practice. Probably on the end of production amount for a single dentist, would you say, George, pushing the limits on what a single
and that's where I saw, like, if it's doing close to 1.5 as a solo, like you can't really grow without becoming a group, and you don't want to become a group. So, there wasn't really an avenue to grow, which takes a lot of the enjoyment out of it, in my opinion.
Right. And so that, that's the one thing I struggle with is that I still do like the clinical side. I do really like the business side. That's the conundrum that I'm in now. Good.
So, Aaron, do you see yourself as more of a productive solo or a profitable group?
Productive solo.
Good. I like that. I like the confidence that you have in the answer. You understand yourself, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like,
yeah. I like the clinical side. I want to be able to the one that they're doing all the clinical dentistry.
You want to have complete.
As much as I want to have an EFTA, I still like placing composites.
Okay. Tell me that 5 years from now.
Yeah, so
I'll pay you $1,000 to set it on there in 5 years.
It might only take 6 months, but I have a lot of time to composites.
Clay, I guess talk a little bit about, you and I are much more similar in our practice visions. But talk a little bit about, I guess kind of the things that you took away from your experience.
Yeah, I think when I first kind of was exposed to shared practices a little bit more on the inside and just kind of seeing what the problem dentists and dental students and basically pre-owners are facing is that I think there's a lot of myths or misinformation that I think is out there about how to do it. What's the best way to do it? Oh, you can't get financing, all these rules that are there. And I think watching you and others do it straight out of school, like that kind of is okay. Well, what else? That kind of broke the glass a little bit. And it's like, okay, well, what else is actually going on? What can I do? And I think there's a lot of growth that you guys in shared practices has kind of shown me. And because in order to figure all this out, like the questions that you're asking, like you have to know yourself. You have to know what kind of practice you want. You have to know what kind of dentistry you want to do. And yeah, it's going to change, I think, over your career. But I mean, it's a big decision. Are you going to buy a practice? You better buy the right one. I mean, we've seen practices all the time that people are trying to buy, and it's like, this is not cash flowing. You have all these goals. You're not going to accomplish these by going down this road. And I think just that pretty real, almost mere, like the way you ask questions to people, really kind of, and we've had conversations too, and you're just like, well, what do you want? And okay, well, based on my understanding of what you're wanting, you're doing all these things and they're not going with what you wanted. I just think that real honest, take a look at yourself, look at the man in the mirror, that I think is necessary. And I think that you guys have kind of helped me do that to kind of figure out what I want. And obviously all the knowledge that about practice, financials, what to look for, why, all this kind of stuff. But as far as us kind of being similar, I've been out 6 months, and I was just telling my wife the other day, I don't think I could practice alone. Like that would be, I don't know if I could do that. I'm very social. I like to talk. I get in trouble all the time. I talk to my patients for way too long. And so I like to have the other dentist there so I can bounce things off of. Somebody that understands what being a dentist is. So I think that the group practice model is something that is attractive to me, because I can be a dentist that's interested in clinical stuff. I can be a dentist that is interested in the business stuff. I can be just a guy, not a dentist, and in my other parts of my life, something that doesn't take over my life. So basically the group model, I think, allows me to do that.
Yeah. And I think it's up to everybody. I guess, Tyler, have you had put thought in the solo versus group kind of for yourself based on, I guess, your experiences and guess what you think you want for yourself?
Yeah, I think that while I was still pretty clinical, I sort of saw myself as a solo. I always saw myself as, just being that one leader of the practice, and that, one sort of, not in an authoritarian sense, but just, having things lean on me, and I wanted to take up that role. But I think that, having seen some of your experiences and going into the clinical arena myself, at school, has kind of made me realize that, I like there being a sense of consensus, and I like being able to work with someone to build something. I just have a tendency to sort of, let a lot of, I shoulder a lot of, guilt and feelings of failure. And I think that it would be very beneficial to me to have someone to commiserate in the low times, but also celebrate when things go well, and be proud of that, share that with someone else. I mean, I feel good about that. I mean, I would still, of course, want to be the leader of the practice, but it would be nice to have someone else to lean on there, or, different people from time to time. I just like the idea of growing that, and also being able to just step back every now and then. And we were actually having a conversation the other day. You said you had your associate in, and you were just talking about how much more you enjoy the pace of things, and how you just, it gave you so much more, wiggle room. And that just came off to me as something a lot more sustainable, and something that I could, do predictably for a long period of time. And I'm not purposely trying to plug the whole, SSP thing, but that's where it's coming from as well. So yeah, I mean, to be short, yeah, absolutely. I see myself in a group practice setting for sure.
Yeah, and I think like for me, it was just sitting there with, if I'm struggling on a case and I have 4 hygienists coming at me for an exam, like that's all me. Like back, I was, I recently was a solo, and I got my associate back. So I got an associate. So I'm loving it again. And I forgot how nice it is, and I'm happy I'm back.
Yeah.
So I guess we can wrap up this intro with kind of 2 things. One being, what do you see as, we'll talk about this first. Like, what do you see as some of the biggest mistakes that you see pre-owners make now that you kind of have, like, these guys are each sitting on, 50 plus evals and, probably close to 100, especially for Aaron and Tyler. So, sorry, Clay. And so, like, what do you guys see as common mistakes that you see over and over and over again that you like, that we can talk about on the show?
I would say people create their own ceilings based off of just preconceived notions of what's possible. People just, they'll if you ask how much money are you planning on making, what's your number? It's usually capped out at something that's modest based on things that they've heard and their own reflections of themselves, and it doesn't necessarily reflect what's actually possible if you apply the right methods to find the right practices and go into the right mentality and the right coaching and the right consultancy. Like, people just don't necessarily, for one, they don't necessarily know all the resources that are out there to use, and then they limit themselves when they go into their opportunities. They don't realize how much more they could be open to. They don't allow themselves to be a little uncomfortable with how much they could be doing. And so that's kind of what I see is people are afraid of a larger practice. They're afraid of just becoming overwhelmed, and they don't realize that some of these things can be more turnkey than you think.
So I want to like Aaron, he screenshotted this Facebook post this morning and shared it in our group. And it was like this guy posting about, and I'm not going to roast him too bad, but like he was posting about like finding a partner. I forgot what group, the Business of Dentistry or something. And he was posting about finding a partner, and they each work 5 days a week and like 6-hour shifts, and they split shift, and they have like this huge practice that's open like 70 hours a week or something. And all of this stuff. And then he's like, and we could each make $250K a year until we pay off our debt. And then we make $300K a year. And, like, these guys know now that, like, if you're doing all of that, like, you got to be making way more than that. Like, that is a level of complexity to your situation that is like all time high. You're working 5 days a week. Like, oof.
Yeah. Credit to them for having such a clear vision, but it was myopic.
Yeah. And I think that just realizing that it can be possible is I think the key, because I mean, you would think that, and you'd be like, okay, that'd be worth it. But then you realize, you peel back the curtain, and there's definitely a lot of practices out there that you can do what you want and be compensated better than that.
I think that people should be, looking at the people that are doing really well and trying to do what some people are doing instead of just trying to do what most people are doing. I think it's a level of comfort with that.
That was awesome. All right, Aaron.
I think a lot of people go down the rabbit hole of thinking that it's a practice that might be what they want, when it never fit what they were looking for, or would never support the lifestyle that they actually want. So they're wasting all this time and effort on, if they had just a little base knowledge of being able to look at the numbers. And you can very, very quickly realize that, hey, not only do I not have enough operatories, but we don't have enough profit to even pay ourselves after paying a bank note. You know what I mean? We just need a few small, little foundational points to be able to handle that, and we could save a whole bunch of effort and time wasting looking at practice that would never, ever work in your situation.
Definitely. Like, how many times, Aaron, do we see the 3-op practice? Like, ugh.
And people are just married to it.
Yeah, they're married to the cash flowing 3-op practice. It's like, you're going to move in that thing and say, okay, when do I move out of this? It's like, oh, yeah.
I think it's expensive.
Yeah. And, I'm with you. It's just, there's like a basic level of evaluation that people, like, if they could just do it quickly, then they could rule out the stuff so they don't waste their time, pursuing an opportunity that clearly doesn't make sense based on their long-term goals or whatever it is. For sure. Clay.
I think people don't get into ownership soon enough. I think they put it off. 3 to 5 years turns into longer than that. 2 years turns into longer than that. I mean, you can put a timeline on it, but I think a lot of people get stuck with, okay, next steps. What do I do? I don't even know where do I look? Like, should I trust brokers? Do I reach out to other dentists? Like, I don't know what I should do and who I should trust. So I think a lot of people, they don't get in ownership quick enough, and I don't think they know what the next steps are wherever they are, whether that be dental school or somebody who just got out of school is in a practice or they're in a corporate office. Yeah. So I just think next steps is a big deal.
So what would you say to that person, guys? Like that person maybe they're listening right now, like, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know where to start. How do I get into ownership?
Well, I think that people are kind of a lot of times just waiting for a sign to come along that indicates to them that it's time to pursue it. I think if you have any intention of ever doing it, you should just start immediately. There's no point in your career at which it's inappropriate to just go for it and just start accumulating as much information as you can and talking to people and start making moves. I think that people just kind of limit themselves and say like, oh, well, when I'll have more time once I get past this stage in my life.
Yeah.
There's going to be a convenient time that comes around where I'll have a little bit more time to, I'm going to buy some books. I'm going to read some books at night, maybe an hour a night or something and learn. And once I feel confident, I'll start making moves. But really, it never works like that. There's never a right time where it just makes more sense. You just make time and you make those opportunities to learn and start to pursue it. And I think that people will find the stuff is a lot simpler as long as you just start doing it and working it into your daily routine. I think it's just people's ineffectiveness in that. And I suffer from it too. I mean, there just goes long stretches where I don't move the chains at all. And I have to remind myself that it's a daily thing that you got to chip away at.
So then the next thing I want to talk about is really just the segments of the show. So you guys are the ones running the show. So what kind of things are we having to look forward to, in the pursuit of ownership?
We're going to hit on valuations again. I know that's a hot topic that people want us to talk about. So we're going to try to get a couple episodes out on that.
And I think kind of going to those valuations, like really kind of diving deep and picking apart some of the misconceptions that, by a smaller practice, that means smaller debt. I don't want more debt, but we can kind of get into why that might not be the best option for you, depending on the situation.
Yeah. And I think that also, being that we're all kind of at different stages in our pre-ownership journey, I for one am totally willing to be transparent about, the steps that I'm taking and explaining exactly what we're doing. I think that it's, we're pretty good at making people appreciate the importance of certain things, but actually sort of walking them through it and giving them sort of some action steps of what they should do to help them, kind of move it along. I think that that's going to be valuable.
And we're starting this thing. I wanted to call it Pre-Owner Underwater, but nobody else liked that name. So it's a
So it's a weird acronym. We can't make that work.
Pre-Owner Underwater. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
There's too many P's and O's and W's, and I mean,
we need to start with the acronym and work backwards. That's
there you go.
So anyway, we're in the pursuit of ownership. There's going to be segments where we get buyers on. And we're going to look at practices with buyers and talk about their goals and visions and how they relate to that practice they're looking at. And, those are going to be really fun episodes. A lot of the things that we like about Practice Underwater are going to be, in that from a pre-owner's perspective. So if you're interested in being on the show, shoot us an email and, we'll work it out. But I think that's going to be probably, in my opinion, one of the coolest things about the show is that these guys are going to be leading that. And then also having guests on that we need to talk about, stuff with pre-owners, like, maybe talk to banks again, maybe talk to some guests that we've had in the past that we could have in the future. Next episode, I'm excited because we talked about valuation for like 6 episodes in season 2. and I guess we're going to talk about it again. If it was up to me solely, we would not talk about it anymore. But
George.
I know we have to, but it
What
just
the people demand.
we give the people what they want. But
That's right.
at the end of the day, I feel like selection is an episode is a topic that was so overlooked. And as we coach buyers, they're always focused on valuation while selecting the wrong practices. You're valuing the wrong practices.
Right.
And so, I want to have a full episode with me and these three guys where we talk about selection, because I feel like that, if nothing else, that in my opinion is the most important thing, is vision and selection, and being able to clearly identify what you want and what it looks like in the form of an acquisition. 100%. That's way more important than valuation in my mind. You can delegate valuation. You can give it to somebody and they can do it for you. You cannot delegate selection and vision. That's all you. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this introduction episode. I'm really, really excited for this segment, and I wanted to kind of be here with them while we introduced it. But eventually I'll get off the air and I'll let them really run with it. And I'm really, really excited for this kind of next chapter of the Shared Practices podcast and the pursuit of ownership. And it's going to be a lot of fun. See you guys next week.